My name is Brian. I was sitting in the glass conference room on the 18th floor when my entire career was quietly erased in front of 12 people. The CEO didn't even look at me when he said it. We've decided to transition the logistics system to an external team. It's time for a more scalable approach. He said it like he was announcing a coffee budget change. That system he was talking about, I built it. Every line, every module, every emergency fix at 2 a.m. when the whole company was about to collapse. Before I could even process his words, our VP, Ethan Cole, leaned forward with a calm smile. "We need someone more scalable for the future," he said. A few people in the room nodded like it was obvious. Someone even chuckled softly. That laugh hit harder than anything else, because what they were really saying was simple. Everything I built was now too old to matter. I didn't speak, not because I had nothing to say, because I understood something was happening that didn't need my permission anymore. The CEO slid a printed document across the table. My system was listed like a product ready for handover. Not a living structure, not a critical backbone, just inventory. No one asked me a single question. Not once. I looked around that room and realized something strange. They weren't discussing my system. They were already past me. That was the moment it hit me. Not anger, not shock, something colder. I was no longer part of the system I built. I was just a leftover piece they hadn't removed yet. Ethan continued speaking, explaining timelines and transition plans like he was talking about replacing office chairs. Clean handover. No disruption, he said confidently. No disruption. I almost smiled at that, because they had no idea what disruption actually meant inside that system. I built it when the company was losing millions a week. I built it when clients were threatening lawsuits. I built it when no one else in that room even understood how the backend connected. And now they were talking about it like it was a plug-and-play tool anyone could inherit. I stayed quiet the entire meeting, but inside something shifted. Not rage, not sadness, clarity. Because for the first time in years, I understood exactly where I stood in this company. Not at the center, not even on the edge. I was already being erased. And the worst part? They believed they were doing something smart. When the meeting ended, people stood up, chairs scraped, conversations moved on like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. As I walked out, I caught my reflection in the glass wall. A 47-year-old systems architect. Still sharp, still experienced. Still the only person in that building who actually understood what was about to be handed over. And suddenly, I knew this wasn't the end of a decision. It was the beginning of a mistake they hadn't recognized yet. 5 years earlier, that same company was close to breaking apart. Late shipments, lost contracts, systems failing weekly. They brought me in as a senior architect, but what they really needed was someone to stop the bleeding. I still remember my first week. Every report I saw was chaos pretending to be structure. Nothing connected properly. Everything depended on manual fixes. One failure could shut down entire regions. They called it a logistics platform, but it was barely holding together. My name is Brian, and I was told to make it stable. No pressure, right? I started rebuilding everything from the ground up. Not just fixing bugs. Rewriting the entire structure. Data flow. Routing logic. Failure recovery, client sync layers. It wasn't just software to me. It was infrastructure, living, breathing infrastructure. There were nights I didn't leave the office. Not because anyone asked me to stay, because if I didn't fix something by morning, thousands of shipments would fail. I remember one night at 3:12 a.m. A core node crashed during peak traffic. No one else was available. No documentation helped. So I rebuilt the routing logic from memory, line by line, while the system was actively failing. By sunrise, it was stable again. No applause, no recognition. Just another good job email that got buried in inbox noise. Over time, the system became the backbone of the company. Millions in shipping flows depended on it every day. Clients didn't see me. They saw results. Executives didn't see complexity. They saw dashboards that looked simple. That was the beginning of the problem. When something works too well, people stop respecting what holds it together. They start believing it holds itself together. I watched that belief grow year after year. Meetings changed. My updates became shorter, then optional, then unnecessary. But I never stopped maintaining it because I believed in something simple. If you build something critical, you stay responsible for it, even when no one remembers your name. That was my mistake. Somewhere along the way, the system stopped being seen as engineering. It became just software, a phrase I heard more and more often. Just software, as if millions of transactions, real clients, real money, real failures were something casual. I should have known what that meant. When people stop respecting what you built, they stop respecting you too. And I didn't see it coming. Not until the day they started planning its future without me. The first time I met Ethan Cole, he shook my hand like he already owned the room. He was younger than me by at least 15 years. Sharp suit, perfect posture, and that kind of confidence that doesn't come from experience but from being chosen. He was introduced as the new vice president of operations. The future of the company, they called him. I remember sitting in that meeting, listening to him talk about innovation, scalability, and modernization. Big words, clean words, safe words. Then he looked at me. Not directly, not fully. More like I was part of the furniture he was deciding whether to keep or remove. We need to simplify some of our older systems, he said casually. Older systems. That was me. After that meeting, things started changing quietly. At first, I thought it was nothing. An email I wasn't copied on. A technical review scheduled without me. A decision already made before I walked into the room. Small things. Easy to ignore until they weren't. Then came the meetings where I was still invited, but not really included. They would talk around me, not to me. Ethan always led those discussions. He had this way of framing everything I built as over-engineered. Like depth was a mistake. Like complexity was failure. One afternoon, he said something I still remember clearly. We don't need someone guarding the past. We need someone building the future. A few people nodded. I didn't respond. Not because I agreed, because I was starting to understand the pattern. This wasn't about performance. It was about replacement. Slow, polished, professional, but still a replacement. I started reviewing system-related emails more closely after that. My name was disappearing from threads I should have been leading. Decisions were being finalized before I even saw the drafts. And every time I raised a concern, it came back to me the same way. Daniel is too close to the old architecture. Too close. As if understanding something deeply was now a weakness. Ethan pushed harder over the next weeks. He proposed outsourcing parts of the system maintenance, then optimization, then full operational control. Each step sounded reasonable on the surface, but I knew what it meant underneath. Slow removal of ownership. I warned them once during a leadership call. If you hand this off without understanding the dependency layers, it will break under load. Ethan smiled when I said that. I think we'll be fine, he replied. We're bringing in experts. Experts. I had been with the system longer than anyone alive in that room. But experience didn't matter anymore. Only presentation did. After that call, I stopped being part of planning discussions. Not officially, just practically. My calendar got lighter. My input stopped being requested. My presence became optional. And that's when it hit me. They weren't arguing with me anymore. They were working around me. Ethan had successfully turned my experience into something inconvenient. Something slow. Something replaceable. And the worst part? He was doing it without ever raising his voice. I found out about the meeting after it already happened. No invite. No calendar entry. No message. Just a short email summary titled, System Transition Plan, Finalized. Finalized. That word stayed in my mind longer than it should have. I read it 3 times before I fully understood what it meant. They had decided to transfer the entire logistics system to an external contractor group. In 48 hours. No technical consultation from me. No review of risk layers. No discussion of system dependencies. Nothing. I walked straight to the executive floor. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I kept walking. When I entered Ethan's office, he looked up like he was expecting me. Calm, composed, prepared. I saw the decision, I said. He leaned back in his chair. Yes, we've already moved forward. That was it. Already moved forward. Like 5 years of architecture could be replaced by a schedule update. I asked him the only question that mattered. Did anyone review the dependency chain before approving this? He smiled slightly. We've had technical people look at it. We're comfortable. Technical people. Not me. Not the person who built it. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. You're missing critical failure paths. If you transfer ownership like this, the system won't absorb the load. Ethan nodded like he was listening, but his eyes told a different story. He wasn't hearing a warning. He was hearing resistance. We appreciate your concern, he said. But at this stage, we need cooperation, not hesitation. Cooperation. That word landed differently. It didn't mean collaboration. It meant compliance. I asked to formally document the risks. Just a written record. Something to protect them from what was coming. He declined. We're treating this as a standard handover. No need to complicate it. No need to complicate it. That was the moment I understood the truth. They didn't think I was wrong. They just didn't think I mattered. I left his office without arguing further, because I realized arguing wouldn't change anything anymore. Back at my desk, I looked at the system dashboard one last time as the transfer countdown began. Everything still looked stable. Perfect even. But I knew what was hidden underneath that stability. Layers no one had bothered to understand. Dependencies no one had mapped. Logic no one had asked me to explain. That night, I made a decision I didn't announce to anyone. If they had already decided my role was unnecessary, then I would stop trying to protect them from consequences they refused to see. Not out of revenge, out of clarity. And for the first time in years, I stepped back. The handover started early in the morning, like nothing important was happening. New contractors arrived in clean shirts, carrying laptops and confidence that didn't belong to experience, only to introduction meetings. They shook hands politely, asked surface-level questions, and set up in a glass meeting room like they were preparing for a normal project. I sat there as the original architect of everything they were about to touch. But no one treated me like that. To them, I was just the internal support contact. That phrase stayed with me. Internal support contact. Not creator. Not designer. Not architect. Support. I walked them through the system step by step. Not because I trusted them, because I was required to. At first, I tried to explain the dependency layers clearly. How one small routing rule affected 3 regional clusters. How a single delay could cascade into global failure under peak load. They nodded, but I could tell they weren't really absorbing it. They were listening the way people listen to instructions they plan to simplify later. One of them interrupted me halfway. Could we abstract this part? It seems overly complex. Overly complex. That word again. I paused for a moment before answering. It only looks complex because it was built to survive failure. He smiled like I had made a philosophical comment instead of a warning. And that's when I understood something important. They weren't trying to understand the system. They were trying to fit it into their expectations. I continued the walkthrough anyway. Not because I believed it would help, but because I had already accepted what was coming. Every explanation I gave became shorter after that. Less emotional, more mechanical. I stopped correcting every misunderstanding. I stopped pushing back. Not out of anger, out of distance. By midday, the contractors began making simplifications in real time, removing what they called redundant layers, ignoring fallback logic because it slowed performance. Each change felt small to them, but I knew what those small changes meant together. The system was losing its memory of survival. At one point, Ethan walked in briefly. He didn't stay long, just glanced at the progress and nodded. "Looking good," he said. "Looking good." That was his evaluation of something he didn't understand at a structural level. After that, I signed off the final handover document. Every section marked complete. Every responsibility transferred. Everything looked clean on paper, but nothing about it felt clean. When I stood up to leave the room, one of the contractors asked me casually, "So, you designed the original version?" I paused. "Yes." He nodded. "That's impressive, but we should be able to optimize it further." Optimize it further. I didn't respond. I just walked out, because there was nothing left to argue about. By the time I reached my desk, my access permissions had already started changing, slowly disappearing, like the system was erasing my presence in real time. I didn't fight it. I just watched. And for the first time in years, I was no longer inside the machine I built. I was outside it, waiting. 6 hours after the handover, the system still looked stable on the surface. That was the dangerous part. Everything looked normal until it didn't. I was at home when the first alert came through. A minor delay in regional synchronization. Nothing serious. At least, that's what the dashboard said. But I recognized the pattern immediately. It wasn't a random delay. It was a missing dependency reaction, the kind that only shows up when deeper logic has been removed. I stared at the screen for a moment, then closed it. I didn't send a message, didn't call anyone. That part of my responsibility had ended. An hour later, another alert came, then another. Small inconsistencies stacking quietly. Data queues backing up. Retry loops increasing. The system wasn't failing loudly. It was slipping, like something heavy losing grip slowly instead of falling all at once. I imagined what was happening inside the office. The new team probably thought it was just early instability. Normal after a transfer. Expected. Fixable. They would be trying quick patches. Restarting services. Adjusting parameters they didn't fully understand. And each fix would feel like progress. Until it wasn't. I leaned back in my chair and watched the logs without interfering. Not because I didn't care. Because I knew exactly where this path led. Years of architecture don't disappear just because someone decides to optimize them. They collapse in sequence. Quietly at first. Then all at once. Another alert came in. This one more serious. A regional shipment cluster failed to sync entirely. Still not global, but close enough to feel the pressure building. I imagined Ethan Cole in that room now. Still confident. Still believing this was under control. Still thinking experience could be replaced with coordination. I almost felt nothing watching it unfold. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Just distance. Like watching a storm move exactly the way you predicted, but no one else believed would arrive. At the 7-hour mark, I saw something that confirmed everything. A rollback attempt had failed. That meant they were already panicking, trying to undo changes they didn't fully understand. That's when systems start to show their real face. Not when they were changed, when they were reversed incorrectly. I closed my laptop because I didn't need to watch anymore. The structure I built was no longer under my care. And now, it was finally going to show them what it was worth. It didn't fail like people expect systems to fail. There was no explosion of alerts all at once. No single dramatic crash screen. It started with silence. Then missing data. Then frozen dashboards across 3 continents. Within minutes, the logistics network stopped behaving like a system and started behaving like scattered pieces of broken logic. I saw it unfold remotely, but I already knew what was happening. The first full outage hit the European routing cluster, then Asia, then North America. Shipment tracking froze mid-route. Packages were still moving in the real world, but the system no longer knew where they were. Inside the company, confusion turned into panic fast. Operations teams started calling each other across floors. At first, they thought it was a server issue, then a network issue, then a temporary sync failure. But every fix attempt made things worse, because they were treating symptoms, not structure. Ethan Cole was pulled into the emergency room within 10 minutes. I can imagine the moment clearly even without being there. The bright screens, the fast voices, the growing tension that starts when confident explanations stop working. He would have tried to stay calm at first. That was his strength. Presentation under pressure. But systems don't respond to confidence. They respond to design, and the design was no longer intact. Client service lines started lighting up. Major logistics partners demanding answers. Delayed shipments turning into contractual violations. Real money starting to disappear in real time. The kind of losses that don't pause for explanations. Inside the building, someone finally said what no one wanted to say. We're losing visibility across the entire network. That sentence changes everything. Because once visibility is gone, control is already gone. I was sitting in silence at home when I heard my phone ring again. I didn't answer. I already knew what it would be. The system logs continued degrading. Not collapsing all at once, but unraveling in sequence. Exactly as I knew it would. One missing dependency exposed another. One simplified layer broke the next layer beneath it. It wasn't random failure. It was structured failure. And structured failure always looks worse than chaos, because it feels organized while falling apart. At some point, Someone inside the company must have checked the old documentation, the real one, not the simplified version the contractors worked from, because I saw a spike in internal access requests to archive system notes. That meant desperation. That meant they were finally looking for what they had ignored. Then it happened. The line that changed the entire tone of the emergency room. A senior operations director said it out loud. "We need Mercer." My name, not my title, not my role, just me. Because at that moment, they weren't looking for an employee. They were looking for the structure they removed. The system kept failing in cascading layers while they searched for answers that were never going to come from quick fixes. And for the first time since the handover, the company understood something they had refused to believe. The system wasn't just software. It was held together by understanding, and they had already given that away. The call came just after midnight. I saw the CEO's name on the screen before I answered. For a few seconds, I just let it ring. Not out of pride, out of understanding. Because once a system reaches this point, calls don't fix it. They only confirm the damage. I finally answered. His voice wasn't the same as it was in that glass conference room. The confidence was gone, stripped away. "What do we need to do?" he asked immediately. No greeting, no formal tone, just urgency. I stayed quiet for a moment. Then I asked one question. Did anyone review the dependency structure before the transfer? Silence. That silence told me everything. He didn't answer because there was nothing to say. Finally, he spoke again. "We need you to stabilize it. We'll do whatever it takes." Whatever it takes. That phrase used to mean control. Now it meant panic. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the dark screen in front of me. They didn't want a discussion. They didn't want explanation. They wanted reversal. But systems don't reverse cleanly once they've been misunderstood. I spoke slowly. The issue isn't something you can patch. It failed exactly where I warned it would fail. Another pause. I could hear voices in the background on his end. Urgent, frantic, overlapping. The company was still bleeding while we talked. He tried again. "Can you come in and fix it?" I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was simple. I could fix it, but not in the way they meant. Not quickly, not cleanly, and definitely not without consequences. "I told you what would happen," I said quietly. There was no anger in my voice, just finality. The CEO lowered his tone. "I understand. We made a mistake." That was the first honest sentence I had heard from him in a long time. But understanding doesn't restore lost contracts. It doesn't recover frozen shipments. It doesn't rebuild trust that is already breaking in real time. I closed my eyes for a moment, not because I was emotional, because I was remembering every warning I had given, every ignored explanation, every dismissed concern. All of it had led here. "I'll help stabilize what I can," I said finally, not because they deserved it, because the system still contained pieces of work I was responsible for in principle. But I didn't promise restoration, only containment. After the call ended, I stayed seated in silence. The company was still inside its collapse cycle, and for the first time in years, they were no longer arguing about my importance. They were living inside its absence, and that was something no meeting had ever prepared them for.